Hello, Manga Matt here with the August manga update. Alright, so a few things I left off of last month's manga update, which usually doesn't happen, but I guess this time it did. Let's get started on those. So I'm not going to say I remember as much as I would have before, so again, doesn't help that two of them was new Lone Wolf and Cub volumes 8 and 9, because I already kind of have a hard enough time remembering a lot of what happens. It's a very fast-paced kind of series. The first one, the last of the ninja clan, the Kuroko ninja clan that has been seeking out and attacking Shigekata and Daigoro has been wiped out, and then in the next one they discover the guy who's currently masquerading as the Lord of Satsuma. There's like this old guy who's been masquerading as a high-ranking official to sort of have him and his clan take over that, take a major seat in Japanese ruling class. He's managed to find one sword school that he thinks can in fact defeat the Jugen Ryu technique that Shigekata is a master of, and actually most of this volume actually involves him fighting off a majority of those foes. With only 2 more volumes to go, and it actually gearing up to end in December, it's gonna be. I think it's gonna be just as good as a lot of what was in Lone Wolf and Cub. Definitely check it out if you haven't been for that. Then Inuyashiki Volume 4, which this one actually takes, which this is the fallout after Inuyashiki took out those Yakuza type guys, and then he's sort of become it. A little more is being sort of publicized about. There's some guy coming around fighting people, and is using above natural abilities. It's him, and then the other guy, what's his name, Samejima, no, I'm sorry, Shishigami is the teenage kid who also has the same mechanical enhancements parts that Inuyashiki has, and of course Shigegami is using his for mostly personal gain. Although he's not entirely selfish, because he does at one point use his abilities to fiddle with an ATM to get it to withdraw a bunch of money, and then uses the money to give him and his mother like a really nice home to live in and not worry about money. So in the one hand he is a sociopath, but on the other hand his selfish personality does lend itself to a little bit of this humanity. Like, you do get the sense that he's doing what he wants to do, but he would just as easily be left alone, I guess. It's possible, kind of in a way, sort of like Kira from the 4th JoJo arc, if he wasn't like this maniacal serial killer. Like, he's weird, and he does have nihilistic tendencies, but for the most part he at least seems to care about at least his mother and a few other people. And then leading to that also is Shishigami's best friend, or one of his friends, who then finds out Inuyashiki, the old man, has the same powers as him, and you get a little bit of training on just kind of what the limits are to his mechanical abilities, and whether or not he has untold features that even he's not aware of. He finds out that his whole body, he can actually access it like a smartphone. Like, he can have his own cell phone, and then he can hear like calls coming in from his own mind and stuff. And of course he didn't know about it because he's in his 80s. It's hard, like for a lot of people at that age, they aren't even that well versed in a lot of the modern technology that we have now, much less technology that nobody even understands. So already it's really interesting. I know that there are plans for a Inuyashiki live action movie, which I think would be pretty cool. Let's see. Next we have Bleach Volume 67, which had a really great fight in here with Hyosube versus Hawach, the Quincy leader of the main bad guys, and it was a really cool fight. It was different. He used this kind of giant calligraphy brush that was also a sword, and then the way that it fought, it was in a very sort of eclectic manner. It wasn't just like a straight up blade. It did all these other things, and it was just a really cool fight overall. It really shows that Kubo has a lot of good ideas in there. It's just whether or not he actually gets around to them, and whether or not they really become kind of this full big idea that he wants. And it's a shame that the major weaknesses then are a lot of his character writings and a lot of his world building. Those are unfortunately the things that you can't have a long-running shonen series like this and sustain yourself without. Is you need those are the big ones. I mean, not saying that fight scenes aren't important or that they shouldn't be done well, but that if I'm not invested, I care less about the fight scenes, and unfortunately Bleach suffers from that sometimes. But like this one, it really makes me wish that like Kubo was better at what he was doing, and he could have been. And, Bleach in the beginning, it was fantastic. A lot of people really enjoyed it, and it's a shame that it kind of dwindled the way it did. And 7 volumes to go. A lot of people are saying they really didn't like it, and that a lot of them are saying that it was a result of Shueisha basically canning the series and telling him he has to wrap it up, and that he maybe didn't have the time he needed to wrap up all of his plot points and stuff. Who knows what could have been, but regardless, that's all there is for Bleach this time. And next here, to finish up the ones I should have done last month, Attack on Titan Volume 19, which of course everybody is loving still, me too. Still waiting on that Season 2 to finally come, and then actually this one, less dialogue, and we're actually getting to some major action to finally go on in this series, with Eren and the gang taking on the Beast Titan, the Armor Titan, and the Colossus Titan. Basically the big baddies that we've been building up, to this whole second half of the series so far. Since basically around like after Volume 11, which is where that first chunk of where the anime stops off right there. And they're revealing kind of this new technology Hange has basically been developing, and how that fights against the Armor Titan, and basically they're just all worried about exactly what or how the Colossus Titan is going to be used in the fight. It's all really interesting and gripping stuff, seeing them playing out tactics and execute them, and each one basically outmaneuvering and outsmarting the other guy. It's really cool stuff. Makes me really look forward to the next one coming out. And then also the Attack on Titan anthology, which I'm surprised it wasn't just called Attack on Titanthology, like put them together. Which that will be coming out in a few months, which will actually be all American comic artists and writers who will be essentially putting their own sort of spoof on the Attack on Titan, series itself, which will be absolutely wonderful. Definitely recommend anybody get that. They had a small brief snippet of it in the Free Comic Book Day comic that came out earlier this year, with some with some panel drawings by Evan Dorkin talking about you know, some jokes and stuff in there with it, which, you know, it's the same stuff that you may have seen in the Bizarro comics, which was a all DC spoof comic series that was produced and is also excellent and wonderful, and you should check it out. Alright, then next up we have Hour of the Zombie, volumes 1 and 2, which this series, it's one of those ideas that it could have been really good, but the way it's come out, it's just kind of okay. Like, the main premise of the series is that in this high school there's these kids, and it turns out that like a whole section of them, they're turning into zombies. Like the main character Akira, he's sort of going about his everyday life, and then all of a sudden like a whole chunk of the kids at school start becoming zombies, and they start, you know, attacking people, eating them, and then, you know, they're getting killed, and then some time passes, and then their brains revert back to normal. Like, some of them still got like their face blown off or something, like, you know, some of them are dead, some of them are alive but severely injured, and then some more time passes, and then they revert back and they start attacking again. It's an interesting concept and idea that I haven't really seen at all, and it does lend itself to some interesting suspenseful moments, like, you know, if you know, like, the whole thing that they always trope about in a lot of zombie movies is, you know, you have the one character that's like, oh, he's not get dead, he'll get better, kind of, and there's like this zombie here, and he's clearly turned, and the guy's just like not out of it. But in here, it's like, you know, some of them, they're not gonna hurt these zombie creatures because they know they'll revert back to normal, so they are technically not gone, which then creates some more tension and suspense with a lot of the action in there, which is new and interesting for me. And then also some of the characters, they decide to sort of board themselves up because they don't want to hurt people, and a whole bunch of them do this. Others are completely, you know, we gotta get rid of everybody that's like this. We gotta purge the school of these guys and stuff, and you know, the other people are just wrapped up in this whole mess. It is interesting in that respect. With a new twist, it creates new problems and new kind of issues come up, and it does make things more interesting than just, you know, the us against them kind of dynamic, which I would think, you know, would it necessarily work with something else? Like, could you make an Hour of the Vampire? I don't think so, because, you know, you're still technically have all of your faculties when you're a vampire, at least in most fiction. But in, you know, in zombie fiction, you know, you're completely gone, and then you revert back. So there's kind of an interesting premise there to play with. The only real drawbacks, though, with this is that one, I don't think the artwork is that great. Some of the character designs, character models, some of them look a little stiff. This doesn't look quite like, you know, it doesn't look quite styled. It looks like somebody who's maybe like just started, and a lot of the character designs maybe aren't quite as dynamic as they could be with their poses, or you know, it's not quite as gory and bloody as it could be. And I don't know, the zombies, they don't seem to be that unique of a design either. Overall, like, the artwork is just passable, really. The other big issue I have with the series and why I'm not really too interested in reading more of it, is that there's no adults present in this series, which is, they don't explain that at all. Like, there's no teachers, there's no adults. The military hasn't been involved yet with, you know, you have no grasp of the scope of exactly what's going on here. Is the whole world being done like this? Is it just the country of Japan? Is it just this one school? I don't know. A lot of people give flack for High School of the Dead, but at least in High School of the Dead, I had a good understanding of what exactly the scope was of what was going on here. You know, there was one mention in the second volume, I think, of him trying to call his parents. One character trying to call their parents, and like that's it. Really? Like, is this after school hours? I don't know. Like, it feels like the author didn't know how to, like, he just wanted to do kind of this Lord of the Flies thing, like let it be just the students dealing with this issue, and he just couldn't figure out how to work in adults trying to deal with this situation. He didn't know how to involve, like, you know, military personnel or you know, anybody like of a mature age in on this whole thing, because of course, you know, if you did that, then it would completely change the dynamic flow of it. You know, it wouldn't be like kids arguing with each other. Obviously, if there's an adult here now, you know, they would be more inclined to kind of follow what they said or something, and you know, it would kind of de-escalate a lot of the tension, I guess. But regardless, you know, something like this, if you're gonna put it in the setting like this, you gotta include everybody. Otherwise, you have to explain why certain groups of people wouldn't be involved in this scenario. Like Fort of the Apocalypse, you know, main characters are at a juvie institute, and then you know, the zombie creatures, they start taking over, and you know, the juvie hall is the only area that's still protected because it's, you know, essentially a prison, and it's fortified. And then even still, there were still a few adults, few scientists, few other peoples that were around. Even The Walking Dead, like, I mean, they explain that Rick was in a coma for like 8 months, and then he wakes up, and then everything is crap. You know, so that's why, you know, there's not a lot of, you know, that's why there's not a setup of communications. That's why, you know, we, the audience, don't know what's going on, is because Rick himself doesn't know, because he's been in this coma for like 8 months. And then, you know, or something like a drifting classroom even. You know, the whole classroom is ported to this nightmare dimension, and they're dealing with that. But even still, some of the teachers were there. They didn't last long, but they were there. I'm just saying, I would enjoy it better if it was written a bit more like the way I would be thinking, in terms of the kind of move. Like, I appreciate it more when a work of fiction at least has characters that are thinking logically, and you explain or at least address certain issues that would have been otherwise brought up in a more realistic scenario, like in a real life scenario, this kind of thing. You know, like John Carpenter's The Thing. I would say that pretty much everybody in that movie acted and thought the way that you would expect someone to act and think in that situation. That's why it's suspenseful, because you yourself can picture yourself in that way. Or it's something like Stranger Things. Basically everything that goes on in Stranger Things, you know, it has a logic to it, and, you know, the reason why certain people are involved in things or not is kind of brought in and explained in a way. Here, again, where are the adults? I don't know. There's no explanation given. And I think that's a real weakness to the series as a whole, because I can't take it as seriously now for that. But, you know, it at least was a neat idea and concept. You know, if I find out later that there was some kind of explanation given for why there are no adults or authority figures that are showing up, and it's just the kids for some reason, you know, I'd be more inclined to pick the series back up and finish it. But as it is, you know, it was just an interesting, neat idea that it could have been done better. Anyway, that's that. Let's see, next, some newer series now, getting into, Haikyuu. This is the big super fantastic volleyball manga series that's been just running rampant all over on bestsellers lists and stuff. This is two kids, Kei Tsukishima and Toru Oikawa, who are both really into volleyball and have both just gotten into high school, and they're going to they've both wound up joining the same volleyball team there. And you know, Tsukishima, the brown-haired kid, he's shorter, but he's just got a lot of energy, and he's really good at. He's always wanted to play volleyball, but he's the only one that's ever been really into it. And you know, he had one time where he got enough together to play a full team, and that's most of the experience he's actually had. Whereas the other hand, Toru Oikawa, the black-haired kid, he's a very good, very excellent volleyball player. He likes doing the setup where he'll knock the ball in the air for somebody else to hit it, but he's also got a huge ego about him. He wants to be in control of everything, and that didn't gel with a lot of the team that he was previously on, and it's sort of given him a complex about whether or not to take charge and be in control on teams. And you know, the two of them meeting together creates this kind of interesting clash and comparison with their methods. You know, Toru is finally able to find someone who can actually deliver the sets that he puts up there. You know, he's matching Kei's energy and his abilities, and this combination creates a very powerful this very powerful combination, this powerful dynamic between them, where they can really excel in volleyball. And then on top of that, there's a lot of a couple other characters in there so far. I really on the one hand, there's plenty of volleyball action in these two volumes, but then on the other hand, there's a lot of focus on the two of them. On the two of them being like really, really good, like developing the two of them really well without I don't see much. I'm sorry, I'm trying to get these names right. It's hard remembering a lot of them. Like it's this weird thing that I have with me sometimes, where I'll read a series and then I can remember the names while they're saying it. I think because like they'll be usually doing a direct dialogue with the other person, so I just assume whatever name they're saying is the name of the person that they're talking to, kind of thing. Kageyama. This is now I know why I was getting it wrong here. Tsukishima is not. This is Hinata. This is some other guy. Kageyama. Kageyama and Hinata. Hinata Kageyama. That's why I was screwing it up so much with these two. That was my bad. But regardless, I really do love this series. At least in terms of just getting some more sports manga out there, and also it being volleyball of all things, a very unique choice to make. I also like the fact that they're focusing a lot on this interesting dynamic rivalry between these two characters, and that they're both happen to be on the same team, and that volleyball is a game that is so ingrained with the teamwork dynamic. You know, it's very rare for for instance, baseball, soccer, or basketball. There's a lot of room in there for one particular player to shine and be more important than the rest of the team. But in something like volleyball, you have to have everybody involved with that, I imagine. And that creates more of a team dynamic in this series. I would actually like it better, though, if there was a little more in there about the characters just gelling with each other outside the court, and more kind of a breather room. But I'm sure the rest of the series is going to flesh out more on that. Okay, so moving along then, we have Case Closed, Volume 59. This this volume again. This is kind of earlier in the month when I read this one. So there was a fairly interesting mystery in here involving a hairdresser who was able to actually create her own alibi by clipping Richard's ex-wife's hair while committing the murder. And it was a pretty interesting one. I always like those mysteries where there's this where it's the main suspect is the one that has the absolute ironclad alibi. Those are the ones that I always enjoy reading the most in Case Closed. It's never always the who done it. It's always the how done it. Like literally all, like they're saying, like okay, so you knew the guy who died and you were there, and we even have, like, you know, there's cut marks and you know, barbershop hair on this guy, but at the same time we have all this evidence to say that you were exactly in the barbershop cutting someone's hair when this person died, and that you're like 100-pound woman. There's no way you could have dragged a body and dumped it in a complete separate part of in, like, you know, 3 blocks away or something. It's like, and then they kind of go into how she did it and stuff, and those are always the ones that I find the most interesting and fascinating. It's kind of like this neat sort of taunt, because at the one hand, like, they know they did it, and the police know they did it, Conan knows they did it, but it's how they did it and how they can get around that alibi is the really interesting one. So I really enjoyed that story. And then what were the other ones? Oh yeah, there was this one where they were at this with this family, and the family, someone in the family was killing off the others and was killing them off, a part of a motif kind of thing. I don't know. I thought this one was kind of a weak story, and which is a shame because it takes up so much of this volume on this one long murder case, and then the final one is sort of a teaser for this next part, specifically as somebody getting killed at a karaoke bar at the end there, which I mean, like I said, it had a good mystery, had a mystery. Let's see. Next up, we get what is it? Oh yeah, Assassination Classroom, Volume 11, Victory. This one is, I believe, this was actually a pretty neat one, because it has the Assassin Classroom, E, the E classroom, and they are actually getting into these the school games. Specifically, one is this one where apparently like the one class is supposed to, like, knock down a pole that the other class is defending. Like, both classes have, like, these poles, and then the idea is one class is supposed to go and knock down the other class's pole. So there's kind of, I guess, this sort of it's kind of like Capture the Flag, except instead of a flag, there's this huge wooden pole that you have to knock over. So there's this kind of strategy of who to leave behind to guard and who to send over to actually claim the objective. And this was a pretty neat one, especially given that, you know, the one guy, you know, the son of the principal, actually employs the use of, like, ringers. You know, these fully adult men who clearly are not in high school anymore, and manages to somehow sneak them into the school roster to be used in this game. And even still, how they pull off a win is rather clever and ingenious for it. But then also on top of that, we get some interesting character bits where a lot of them are still training to try and figure out how to eventually stop Kuro Sensei, and then also one deviation where they help out an old man who's assisting some kids at this kind of afternoon school place. You know, it was a fairly fun little read for this volume. 10 more to go for Assassination Classroom, which again I thoroughly enjoy. Still, it's a very interesting kind of plot and premise for it. Let's see, next up, Toriko, Volume 35, with the conclusion of the monkey ape part of the journey, where they finally get pair, the next gourmet item that they need from God's perfect meal plan, and actually the final fight with the Monkey King is actually a pretty interesting one. Like I said, I've been liking a lot of these neat kind of fights that they've had with the monkey and with all the other creatures here on the various islands, and they finally managed to actually stop him. And then also some interesting developments about actually who a lot of the other characters are, specifically characters that they thought were actually long time gone and have recently returned back in the series. With and then I guess they're on their way to whatever the third one was. They haven't explained what the third. I guess they did earlier when they listed all of the items of God's meal plan, and then I guess I forgot it, but again, it's really interesting, especially how they eventually finally stopped the Monkey King in that last part. Next up is Food Wars Volume 13, which concludes the Fall Classic arc with Soma against in a three-way bout with what's his name, Akira Hamamiya and the other guy. They didn't give me a recap page. I can't remember some of these characters, but yeah, it's Akira Hayama, Ryo Kurokiba, and Soma, and the final fight between them and their fish dishes, which again, a really nice little explanation of some of the food items they prepare here, and then actually beginning the next part of their training, which is them actually interning at a particular restaurant, and then they're supposed to work at the restaurant and elicit some kind of change in the restaurant itself, and depending on how that goes, it will reflect on their performance in the thing. In their schooling and stuff. Essentially, it's kind of like, I guess, if you did like Ramsay's Kitchen Nightmares, except like instead of Chef Ramsay, it was a student chef, and it's the student chef who has to go in and fix what's wrong with the restaurant, which actually, thinking about that would actually be a hilarious premise for a reality television show, especially since I think Ramsay's Kitchen Nightmares is actually ended, which I don't blame them for ending that after they did that episode with what's their name, the married couple who had that one Italian restaurant and they refused to listen to any of Ramsay's suggestions, and then didn't even pay their waitress, with tips. Didn't even give her tips and stuff, and then like that was actually, I think on record, that was actually the only one that Chef Ramsay himself actually walked out of because he couldn't sit there any longer to put up with them. I mean, that had to be the best episode right there. They couldn't have topped that one, and that was actually, I think, that was actually near the end of the show's run, I think, was that one, which that could have been the best episode. But regardless, like, that would actually be kind of an interesting idea. If you just took like student chefs from, like, I don't know, whatever the Ivy League equivalent of chef restauranting colleges are, like, do that. Put them in like a failing restaurant, and then make the subsequent improvement of the restaurant be their final grade in the class. That would actually be a hilarious setup for a reality television program. Because again, on the one hand, you have kids who maybe have never had any practical experience in a real restaurant, dealing with the stress of a real restaurant, and on top of that, the restaurant is already a disaster on the onset. It's kind of like giving like an automotive mechanic student a beaten up, broken down junkyard car, and then telling them to fix it and make it work, and then making that the final exam is fixing and making a broken junky car run properly. Again, maybe I'm putting too much thought into it. Maybe, it's again, I haven't read the next volume to know if they continue with that or if they move on to some other plot. But regardless, I thought that was a neat little idea in that one. Then next up we have Iron Wok Jan, Volume 6, which is mostly fallout after the first big tournament that they were in, and kind of John and some of the, and essentially a lot of the other competitors from those schools all basically coming back to start working at the Gobancho Chinese restaurant. And then on top of that, discovering that someone who previously worked at the Gobancho restaurant and then left has come back and is actually now wanting to recruit John to work with him in his restaurant, and kind of how he does work, how he does his work and stuff. And he's kind of like sort of a bad influence, I guess, for John, a possible bad influence. Which again, that's interesting. A new kind of villain rival after the utter defeat and humiliation John gave to that one food critic during the first 5 volumes. Then next up we have Angel Sanctuary Volume 6, which he's out of hell. Setsuna is out of hell after the whole mini hell arc thing, and other stuff happens. That's really about all I got. There's a lot of, like I said before, there's a lot of these different plot lines that keep going on. So reading it volume by volume there's not a lot of chunk that really happens. There's maybe like 1 or 2 big plot reveals or something, but regardless, it's still going along. It's still pretty fun. Then let's see. Next up, we get Flowers of Life, Volume 3, which we get some very interesting character dynamics from a lot of the high school characters in here. Again, it's hard for me to really say what happens without just explaining, the whole plot. Just a lot of neat character dynamics. There was one particular part where they were doing they were all getting together for like a Christmas celebration, which I thought was pretty neat. You don't really see much Christmas mentioned or brought up in anime or mangas ever. And then also more detail and more is put in talking about some of the characters who are wanting to write manga and stuff, which again is kind of interesting when you see like a manga writer doing a series about someone wanting to make manga. It's kind of like a novel about someone wanting to write a novel, and I guess, or like a movie about people wanting to make movies. You get to see kind of what the author themselves are wanting to say about either the process or about the medium itself in a way. Pretty neat. And then let's see, next up we get Wolfsmund, Volume 7, which has been a while since there was a new volume of Wolfsmund. This one picks up fairly soon after Volume 6 with a group of with one particular army that's wanting to now claim the Wolfsmaw now that the previous owner has been taken out, and they're planning to break in and invade and take over it. But at the same time, finding out instead that there's a new force, a new sort of aristocratic leader who's come in to essentially reclaim the Wolfsmaw from them. And again, it's another one of those bittersweet endings, which has been sort of a highlight of Wolfsmund, is that the good guys almost never win. The good guys almost always get brutally killed and suffer horrible, crippling losses, which again makes it those few times when they actually do win so much more satisfying. So again, I highly recommend Wolfsmund to anybody that likes a lot of that historical drama with a lot of medieval military tactics, because there is a fair amount that's thrown in here about military tactics. You know, the way castles are built, the way certain tactics are done, even the fact that the one high tower, the entrance gate, is built roughly about like 7 or 8 feet off the ground. The fact that it's built, the entrance is built high, and then there's this collapsible stairway. Just that alone is this super effective kind of tactic when it comes to defending a particular spot. Because then, anybody trying to break in then has to sort of build a platform, which is slowing them down. And then you also have the height advantage, so there's that. There's a lot of these little things that they throw in that you don't realize are simple and highly effective defense tactics. So I really enjoy it a lot. It'd be interesting if they ever made an anime out of it. Although, on the one hand, I guess it doesn't seem likely, especially given how infrequent the volume releases of these are and how very little attention it actually gets. I think it barely has a mention on it on a Wikipedia page, which I guess is kind of disappointing in a way. One Piece, Volume 79, with I believe the conclusion of the Doflamingo arc, with Luffy giving this one final mega fight with using his Gear 4 fighting, and just everybody is fighting Doflamingo. He's essentially made this sort of cage, this bird cage thing with his string ability, and he's just slowly crushing the entire city inside these little strings that wreck anything it touches, and just everybody's inside just trying to push it back because Luffy just needs like 10 minutes to just get a quick power nap in so he can fight some more, and you just get this great tension of just everybody trying to push back on Doflamingo and his abilities, and it really is such a good climactic fight with that. It's just more of what you really want out of One Piece with these big fights. It's gonna be interesting where the next arc is. I think the next arc supposedly has something to do with like an island of animals or something, which again, given Oda's crazy imagination, just by itself, an island of animals could have all kinds of weird possibilities to it. And then, let's see, next up we get Sakuran. I've been getting a lot of those other Miyoko Anno series, and I thought, getting Sakuran here, which came out a few years ago, was probably something I should have gotten sooner. This is the story of a sort of, they're not called geishas, they're called like these sort of women, these women that live in sort of pleasure houses, and men will come to visit them, and all the women are of various ranking order based on how sought after they are by the men who come to visit. And this is the story of one lady who named Kyoha, and she is basically brought to the brothel to live and is raised in prominence, and basically it's her life and the sort of tragedies that she lives with, basically growing up in this sort of pleasure palace, and the way that I guess it's different than some of the other women who had maybe a more normal life and then were brought into the pleasure palace, versus her who just lived her whole life there. And you're seeing her do things like work through her feelings of having a first crush and first love, working through her feelings of having friends or who her friends actually are, and then the one woman who's, I guess, supposed to be kind of her mentor, but at the same time is incredibly jealous of her because she knows that she's going to get old and wither away and won't be, and basically that's the end of her career, whereas this child here is going to grow up, be more attractive than her, as she grows less attractive, and then she's going to take over in her place, and I guess sort of that bitter jealousy of that, and on the one hand, like I did enjoy it, but at the same time, it is kind of hard to follow in a lot of places. I don't think it had quite as much of a pull on me as some of Anno's other works she's done. I'd say it's just okay. It's just an okay series. Maybe if I reread it again some other time, I might enjoy it more if I can absorb more of what's going on. Then next up we get Volume 7 of Master Keaton, which actually had some pretty nice little stories in here. I especially like this first one with a guy in Keaton on a plane he's after him because he supposedly killed someone and has then been collecting on their insurance. With this sort of interesting moment right here, with a kid holding a gun up to one of the characters on the plane, with a toy gun, mind you, but talk about different times. Times used to be when a child could bring a toy gun onto a plane, a highly realistic replica gun onto a plane, and totally not get stopped or anything for it. I thought that was pretty surreal to see right there. And then a few of the other ones here. I especially also like this one where Keaton is after this. Keaton is getting assisted by this one guy, and they're both on the run from these two bounty hunter guys who are after him because he has paperwork that could be used as evidence against their boss. And it's another case of Keaton on the run from men who are also military trained. And so it has some pretty interesting fun moments in here where Keaton is having to use his cheap piece of garbage car to do things like traverse over a river and using it to blind people with the headlights that can be switched on and off on the outside, which was a common feature on a lot of older cars. And just overall just showing Keaton and his ingenuity and his quick thinking and survival instincts. It seems like there's always a sort of blend to a lot of the Master Keaton stories. Either Master Keaton is either like a whodunit mystery story, or it's a cat and mouse wilderness survival story, or it's some kind of slice of life kind of story, usually involving either his dad, him, or him and his daughter, or it's something archaeological where Keaton solves something related to a piece of ancient history or something. And it's usually something involved with like a person's cultural history or something. And here we get a good blend of kind of all of that with actually one storyline, I think, actually dealing more with Keaton's best friend and his sort of scorned love life as he's trying to woo this one woman who winds up being after someone else for various reasons. The only part in here that I really didn't buy was this one scene where a guy is running away and Keaton takes the time to untie his shoes and then throw them like a bolo and completely trip up his feet. Because one, there's no way that Keaton would have the time to stop, untie his shoes, then let loose enough slack out of said shoelaces to even throw them like a bolo, much less there be enough slack in length to actually completely wrap around a person's legs to like trip them. It seems like one of those things like they didn't know what to it seemed like the writer was like, okay, Perp is running away. How does Keaton catch him? And they forgot, like, oh, right, Keaton's not holding anything, so what's he gonna use? And they were like, maybe he throws his shoes at him. and they were like, okay, make it happen. And I don't know, that was the one like minor nitpick I had with that one scene. There was also some interesting other ones here, specifically one involving Keaton going after a guy who was killing people following a particular atrocity that happened during the Gulf War conflict, and then or no, not the Gulf War conflict. I'm sorry. Yeah, I think it was during. Yeah, it was during Iraq, during a different Iraq in the 80s, and then also an interesting one where Keaton has to goes into detail about a particular painting, and then one about that was actually more about a family that was brewing whiskey than it was actually about Keaton or any of the other family members themselves. So some neat little stories there with Master Keaton. I absolutely adore Master Keaton. It's a shame that it didn't get more than it did. It got like 40 episodes, a 40 episode anime, and that's been about it. Especially considering how much people love Monster, how much people love Naoki Urasawa's other stuff. Now I know Urasawa didn't technically write this, and that's a point of contention for even himself as to whether or not he did it. But I think that it's a decent series. It's a shame that something like Case Closed, which I find a lot of the stuff that happens in Master Keaton is very similar to it, that it didn't just strike a chord. Or at the very least get an American adaptation. I could totally see Master Keaton getting aired on television in America as like one of those staple shows on a network like NCIS or Law and Order or something. Just the Adventures of Master Keaton. You could make 8 seasons out of that on a USA Network budget. Let's see. Next up we have Red Rock, which is by Hayashi Seiichi. This is another one of those very avant-garde, very underground manga collections. This is the same guy who did the Golden Pollen and other stories, and also did the Red Color Elegy before, I believe. And this is a collection of supposedly the rest of the works that he did during the 60s and 70s for Garo, which was the alternative underground manga publishing company. I do also like that at the end here they do give a sort of detailed essay explanation talking about a lot of kind of the things that were influencing him during that time period, and also a lot of maybe what could have been various influences to a lot of the works that he did in here, to at least try and give you context for a lot of these very otherwise abstract manga stories and manga expressions. If you like a lot of that very extreme kind of expressionism or very underground and very kind of unrefined kind of art, more artsy and more ethereal kind of manga stuff, Red Rock is more of that same kind of stuff. But I wouldn't necessarily recommend it to the average manga reader. Myself, I thought it was okay. I thought there was some few neat things in there. I guess if I reread it again, I might like it a little bit better. And also the essays in the back are also really good sort of, tidbits for explanation on a lot of things in there too. Then let's see, next up here we have Kuroko's Basketball, which now I know a lot of people are really loving Haikyuu, and I like it too, but I'll tell you right now, I love the living hell out of Kuroko's Basketball. I just immediately love this series, and I know I'm maybe overhyping it a little bit as opposed to Haikyuu, which again I enjoy Haikyuu, but like you know, a lot of what just sort of they do a better job, I think, of establishing things in Kuroko's basketball, which again, this is an omnibus with 2 volumes in it, and Haikyuu, I read the first 2 volumes of that, so it's still, I believe, a fair comparison as far as plot, as far as what's, you know, content wise. But so Kuroko is essentially this kid who was a student on a basketball team that was referred to as sort of the golden generation, or like the perfect generation. And this was the miracle generation. There was apparently this one basketball team that was so good that like they were like, nobody's seen these. Every single one of them were phenomenal, prodigy level basketball players, and Kuroko was on this team, and he was then, I guess, at some point transferred to a different high school, or maybe it was in middle school and now they're in high school. But regardless, Kuroko is at now this different high school, along with another guy, Taiga Kagami, who is featured here. Kagami, he's a fairly tall athlete, and he also has a lot of. They explain that he has a lot of potential. He's already a pretty decent basketball player from his time that he was in America, coming back now to start high school in Japan again. And so what really sets this up for me, though, is that Kuroko and Kagami just have this great sort of chemistry with each other, much in the same way that the 2 guys in Haikyuu do. But in this case, I love Kuroko's attitude in that he's so aloof, and part of that is they explain that Kuroko, he's just really good as a passer. Like, Kuroko is a terrible shot in a regular basketball game, but he's phenomenal at getting the ball and passing it around to get to people to score baskets, which instantly makes this a more interesting manga for me, because again, the whole point of winning in basketball is which side scores the most points. So then your immediate interpretation then is that whichever player scores the most points is therefore the best player on the team. And so you start out with a character who is from the Miracle Generation, which is a whole team of prodigious basketball players, who is himself a terrible at collecting points, but his main feature was that he was really good at passing. And of course this plays into his personality and his character, in that people will just not notice him in a room, and he'll just sort of come in and out, and it's just a really funny kind of setup for a character and his quirks. And then Kagami is also pretty interesting in that, you know, he's very hot-headed, he's very abrasive, he's very quick to kind of get angered or to jump at somebody or something, and just the 2 of them work really well immediately. And then also on top of that, all of the other members of the Miracle Generation, they actually all went and joined different high schools. So now on top of, you know, the main plot of Kuroko and his team just getting into these playoffs and going through these basketball tournaments, you then get the added bonus of slowly meeting all the various members of the Miracle Generation, which is set up as kind of, I guess, like mini boss battles, because each of these players is like so good, and the team not only has to win the game, but usually has to figure out how to get around or deal with one of these Miracle Generation players. So it's a pretty neat setup with a lot of good plot laid out for it, and I really love it a lot, especially because, you know, I just like basketball manga. Like I loved Slam Dunk, and I also love Ice Shield 21, and a lot of the weird quirky personalities in here really remind me a lot of both of those series. You know, Haikyuu, just it hasn't really gotten around to sort of establishing like the team dynamic in there yet, which I guess it's just taking longer to get to that point. But I really love Kuroko's basketball myself for that. And let's see, next up, Tokyo Ghoul Volume 8, which this actually had a fair amount of backstory with Toka and with what's her name, Toya, and sort of their backstories with each other. Ayato and Toka, and their backstory with each other, and kind of how they had a falling out with each other on their sort of ideologies on how to live their life as ghouls, and then also the fallout with Kaneki and how he's now going to go on his sort of new journey to I guess get stronger, or to otherwise sort of go after the main. I guess eventually go after the one-eyed owl. Was, I guess, the main series antagonist now. So again, a really nice volume for Tokyo Ghoul. Otherworld Barbara. This is the Moto Haikyuu manga that's come out now, and this is Volume 1, with the second volume coming to be determined. And I really wish Fantagraphics would have at least given a better indication for when Volume 2 is coming out, if they already have a Volume 1, or even just had a Volume 1 planned. This series follows a guy who is essentially a dream diver. He's a guy who specializes in diving into people's dreams and sort of finding out information. Like, he apparently found out information about where a serial killer was hiding bodies, and was able to get that information relayed to the police. His name is Kiria, I think is his name. Yeah, or no. Yeah, let's see. Yeah, Kiria. No, Kiria is the name of the kid. Let's see. What's his name? Shit. But regardless, there's a guy who he's a dream diver. He goes into people's dreams, and then he's been recruited because there's this one woman who previously went into a coma after killing her parents and then eating their hearts, and then they're finding out that inside this dream world she's created this own kind of land, this own kind of world and everything, and it's become so realistic, and other people are actually getting tied into it. Like this one kid who is actually the son of the dream diver has been having visions of this land that's actually called Barbara, and which is the title, and that actually the woman who's in a coma has actually been influencing things that have happened in the real world. And, like, she's either a strong psychic or something, or there's something about her dreams that's seeping into the real world, and so it's become more and more important for the guy to dive into her dreams and try to figure things out, or try and stop her. It deals with a lot. In a lot of ways, it's kind of similar to Inception, or similar in ways to like The Cell, where it involves a lot of diving into people's minds, and also at the same time kind of adopting your own persona while in that state. It's really great, and again, I really love Moto Haikyuu. It's a shame that more of her stuff hasn't come over, and it's a shame that Fantagraphics doesn't produce more manga. Which again, this is a gorgeous release for it. It's a shame that their other series, Wandering Sun, has apparently not. It's apparently not going to get any more releases, which is a shame because it was at 15 volumes, and the series has only come out in English up to volume 8. And it's like you get to the halfway point, and it's like you can't. They won't make it to the end. One other interesting tidbit I found out while reading this is that apparently Matt Thorne, who has actually been a long time translator for Viz, is apparently a woman. He previously a man has gone through a change and is now a woman. Did not know that. Apparently, it was announced on Matt's Twitter some time back that Matt prefers the pronoun of her for being referred to, and didn't know that. So it's always good to sometimes check a lot of those bios and little endnote things in the back. It's a shame that that Wandering Sun didn't get more of a release. It's a shame that more of a Fate-graphic stuff didn't come out. But we got Barbara, and hopefully the next volume will come out sometime. Definitely recommend that. Then next up here we got the Heroic Legend of Arslan, volumes 1 through 5. I always enjoy fantasy series and even fantasy manga, which is kind of odd because on the one hand, how do you really define fantasy in manga? Like, how does something technically qualify as in the genre of fantasy? Like, is Arslan fantasy only because it takes place in this sort of Euro medieval kind of setting, or are you saying then that like Dragon Ball Z isn't fantasy because it's got guys flying and shooting each other with energy blasts from their hands? I mean, clearly that's fantasy. Or even like a lot of modern comic books. Like, are you really gonna tell me that Spider-Man isn't fantasy, or that the Incredible Hulk isn't fantasy? Anything in the Avengers isn't fantasy? I mean, by definition, it's fantastical. But then I guess it's one of those things where it's like you'll know it when you see it. So in the one, and then also on the other hand, like Arslan, like it's hard to even define it as a fantasy because there's almost nothing fantastic in it that happens. It's kind of like saying, it's like if I were to describe Wolfsmund as being fantasy. This is not fantasy. It's like I don't know, historical medieval drama because like that's the time period and that's kind of the sense of it, like, or maybe medieval action drama because it's mostly action driven. But like Arslan, like it's mostly a medieval drama of essentially Arslan, who is the king, who is a prince of the land of Par, I believe. In the kingdom of Par, and it's been invaded and taken over by a rival kingdom of the Lusitanias. And at the time, Arslan was able to get out of there, along with his a royal warrior named Daryun, Daryun, and then following that, his father is then captured. The kingdom of Pars is taken over by the Lusitanians, who have now been taken on by this new religion, and has been using that to sort of further their agenda. And then along the way too, Daryun and Arslan are now recruiting other people like Narcissus here, who is sort of this brilliant tactician, very of the mind, and he actually at one point had his own country, and then he decided to leave it all to go and be a recluse. And now they need him again because they need all the help they can get, and they need the best people to reclaim the land of Pars. And so it kind of goes from there. Sort of Arslan assembling this group of people who will be able to help him reclaim his lost land, and also hopefully save his father, who's only now just being held prisoner, but at any point he could be killed. The only major gripe I would have with Arslan is that 5 volumes have happened, and it feels like very little actual plot development has come about. Like, it's really just a lot of characters like just talking to each other. Like you can tell that this was adapted from a novel because, you know, I'm sure this would comprise a large chunk of a story, but in comic book form, like it goes by really slowly. You know, a lot of this could have really been, you know, either trimmed down, I guess, or something. I don't know. I would have expected there to be a lot more plot kind of developing, you know, more big stuff kind of being revealed at times, you know, which again makes me wonder about those comic adaptations of Game of Thrones that I've seen, and just how much of Game of Thrones has actually been adapted in comic form already, and also if it's accurate to the books. So, but you know, Heroic Legend of Arslan, I would say that it's pretty good. You know, it's the same artist who did Full Metal Alchemist, and on the one hand, like you can look and tell, like, oh, that character is that, like, especially with Daryun, looks very much like Colonel Mustang. You know, Arslan looks a lot like Edward Elric, or especially Al. You know, some of the other characters look like various other characters from this series. This looks a little bit like the teacher, their teacher from Full Metal Alchemist to me. But this is actually supposed to be a dude, which I thought was kind of interesting, like how they described in the novels versus here. And it's a shame that that the novels for this haven't actually come over, because Yoshiki Tanaka has actually gotten his Legend of the Galactic Heroes novels translated and brought over already, with the second one already out, and that's supposed to be a 10-volume series. But I guess maybe they're waiting for that whole series to get fully released, and then see how those sales go, and then release the Heroic Legend of Arslan novels over. Because again, because Arslan actually has not had an ending yet. I think I read an article somewhere on Anime News Network that they're planning on having one more volume of Arslan to wrap things up. But again, that's you know, apparently that's like 15 books or so. So that could be like almost a decade's worth of you know, work there. And then for the final part, again, like I've tried to do in the past, is focusing on one complete old school series. You know, last time it was Wounded Man, and much in line with that, this too is a Ryoichi Ikegami series. This one is Strain. You know, it's interesting I bring this up because the second season of The Strain has just premiered on television, which is completely unrelated to this, other than the similar sounding title. This is a series about a guy named a professional assassin named Mayo the Horse, and he'll kill anybody if you give him $5. Give him $5, he'll kill anybody. And from this, he eventually gets tied into this organization, and also into his various lineage and his bloodline, which is why it's called The Strain. This bloodline is related to an organization named Kusaka, the Kusaka organization, which is this big conglomerate CEO group that is recently involved with possibly attaining oil rights for all of Asia, essentially making Asia a major power player in the global economics of the world. And it's revealed that actually the head of the Kusaka organization is Mayo the Horse's brother, and also on top of that too is that his brother has been doing a lot of backdoor dealings to try and get enough money and get enough funding to actually front a lot of this major business venture for them, and it falls into a lot of this back and forth kind of stuff. In a lot of ways, it reminded me of Sanctuary, which was again by the same people. Barunson wrote it, Ikegami drew it, and also it was kind of in a way about brothers. In Sanctuary is about two people who are as close as two people could get as sort of brothers, and in here it's also about two brothers, and one has been climbing up the social ladder in the politics and in the above ground sort of way, and the other one has been climbing up the ladder in the underground kind of way. So the main difference though being that this deals a lot more with corporate stuff and deals a lot more with kind of the fallout of the one brother making a shady dealing to get extra money, and then that shady dealing becoming something that actually hinders him later on, because it winds up getting used as blackmail. And then also there's just so much fighting and so much gun action in here. It's essentially like a John Woo movie. Like, it feels very John Woo with a lot of the gunfights, a lot of the gunplays. There's one guy in there named Angel who's a Malaysian cop, and he's obsessed with killing and doing all sorts of sexual violence to the people he captures. He's just this really crazy, over the top kind of villain character. And then you also get this other guy who's like this really fat guy, and he's the head of this one underground syndicate, and he's just all about just one-upping people, and he also kind of hates how fat he is, but at the same time, like, he knows that other people are unassuming of him because he's so fat. He knows that being fat is kind of a gift, because people find you as less intimidating. They're not as on guard around fat people, and he'll occasionally kind of use that to an advantage for himself. It's just a really fun series. I highly recommend it. It's a little easier to find and get a hold of than Sanctuary, so if you can get it, highly recommend picking it up. But anyway, that's all I got for this manga update. I really wasn't expecting to get as much out of it as I did for this month, but I do know that September will probably be a pretty slow month, I think, for manga update, with October then picking it up. It's just one of those slump months, I guess. Anyway, check y'all later.